Hi, Steve.
Hey, Jim.
You know what? I don't mean to brag,
Yeah.
but I know all the lyrics to YYZ.
Why? 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 Why?
And welcome once again to Two Guys Talking About Records, a vinyl community podcast where every week we two guys get together and we talk about records. A special one this week. We'll get to that in just a second. But my name is Jim, and I am a record store owner.
And I'm Steve, a record collector, and behold my new record room. I finally got it set up here, and I hope everyone likes it. I modeled it. I modeled it after one of my favorite spots in the whole wide world, and that way I feel at home.
Now, we should probably explain, because as you've been watching the past episodes, you know, Steve was moving to Colorado, but he's here in the store. So you're going to see me looking this way.
Yeah.
Steve's going to look this way.
Yeah.
We are actually sitting in the same room together. And yeah, I would be honored to have your record room look like the store, but it would get a little confusing.
I should probably take a picture and a screenshot that as
There
my
you go.
background.
You could put in a virtual background and really mess with me. How are things going?
It's going pretty good. You know, we're getting ready. The house hopefully will be on the market on Friday. And it's right now it's just trying to get ready for photography and showing, but there's not much left to pack.
It has got to be a crazy time, I tell you.
It's been something, you know, in the past. Again, I've had movers do this, and now this time I'm doing it, and Patty, and it's like, what kind of sucks.
And the time's coming up pretty fast, isn't it?
It is, yeah. We take ownership of the house we're renting on the 19th, and they're going to move us 16th, 17th, but it'll take about 10 days to get there.
Which I think is odd for them to pack and move. Are they taking the long way around the Gulf of Mexico?
It's going by boat. And it's going through it's going through Baltimore, I guess, and they just can't get the dang
They'll
boat
be waiting
out.
for a while.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, best of luck. I know that's got to be a stressful thing, especially you're taking. We've talked about essential records recently as well. You're taking those with you in a car.
I am. It's been nice to have them there because I've been playing them this week. So it's been really good.
They're the essential ones.
Yes.
You can back up a couple of episodes and catch up on that.
Yep.
So we're going to talk about, and I should explain myself, all the lyrics to YYZ. I still feel weird. I'm looking over at you and I got to try not to because
it's odd.
We're doing this. YYZ is an instrumental song off of Moving Pictures by the group Rush. So it's just kind of an inside joke. I know the lyrics to La Villa Strangiato too as well.
Okay.
But today, given the fact that Steve is kind of still in flux with just a few records visible and accessible, we decided we're going to do a long time effort of mine, and that is to get Steve introduced to the band Rush. So we'll call today's episode A Beginner's Guide to Rush. How does that sound?
Perfect.
Down the line, I think that this is a great subject matter because I think you've got a wealth of knowledge of a lot of other genres and other groups. So maybe this is something we could do down the line in future episodes and just call it, an introduction to, say, like punk, or an introduction to jazz, or if we want to get group specific to other ones as well, or maybe even genre specific. That could be a fun one as well. But given today and the fact that I have access to my collection and you do not, I thought we would just start you off and see if I can bring you over to the north side.
Okay, to the very cold, snowy side.
But we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
You've had a couple forays into Rush, and I think that's been mixed with mixed success.
And I actually had all their early CDs. I mean, when they're you can buy them for $5-6 back in the 90s. So I think all the Rush CDs up until, the mid 80s. Now, how often did I listen to them? Well, let's just say after the flood, I didn't rush out and grab them again.
No,
I didn't rush out again.
There we go.
Oh,
see what you did there.
Yeah.
So we'll get to that in just a second. And I think we do have one quick news article to get to. But because this is the Vinyl Community Podcast, we'd like to talk about our recent pickups, and you actually have a few this time.
I do. Yes.
So what do you have to show off this week?
I had to pack these up just to bring them here. No, actually, Jim had, I bought these. Well, one I bought from Jim. So the first one, I did get this from Radio Wasteland, and it is 60s Japanese garage psych. Look, and they're wearing jock straps. So that's kind of cool.
Could be the
And,
sumo stuff.
yeah. Bonsai, 14 songs, 12 groovy grooves.
Oh my.
And, so yeah, it's Japanese garage rock, which is pretty awesome stuff. I mean, I like it. Is it all essential? Probably not, but Japan really has put out some great stuff, and I like their psych music a lot. And some of their garage rock's great, and they put out. There's been some great new music coming out of Japan. So yeah, that was something. This is a unofficial release. There was only one official release of this, but it's been released unofficially a number of times. So
Really?
Yep. So it's unofficial, folks, but it sounds great.
We won't report you.
All right. I got this one. It was one of these clearance sales, and Tom Petty and Southern accents. And I like Tom Petty. I didn't at the start. I mean, I wasn't a big Tom Petty fan in college. My little brother was. He got me into Tom Petty, like some people are into Rush. He did buy Rush too, by the way. He had 2 Rush albums. And but this was like on a clearance sale, so I thought to buy it. Essential, no, but it has a few. What it has, Rebels is on here, and Southern Accents is on here. Yeah, it was super cheap. Okay, that's why I bought it. I like the album. I have nothing against this album. I think it's a great album. It's just, did I need this album? I didn't, but it was cheap. So, and the final one, and it's Rush. And so Jim gifted this to me before I left, and I was listening to this before the broadcast because it does have, actually, I do know Spirit of Radio and Free Will. I do know both those songs. And then after that, we pretty much don't know a dang thing. But I've listened to this, I bet 4 times.
Really?
Just so you know. Yes.
Well, good. So we were primed for the discussion.
Well, I fell asleep twice. But yeah, it was a good sleep, and that's great music. I mean, if it's fitful, that just means it's not very good.
You fell into a fitful sleep, is what you're saying?
Yeah, no.
Oh,
I was in a nice slumber.
Oh, okay.
No, I was really tired. But
It's an inside joke.
I have been spinning. I have been spinning this, and Jim, there's all kinds of his secret messages here.
There we go.
And, yeah, Jim told me. What about you, Jim? What did you pick up?
Well, I had an uneventful week.
Oh.
It's not, well, I don't want to say uneventful. I got something very late that's actually pretty darn cool. First up, I decided to keep a copy of Three Dog Nights Cyan. This has got, I think probably you could consider this to be a guilty pleasure album because of the song Shambhala. I've always just adored that song. There's some other great stuff on here, but this came into the store. I mean, super cheap album as it is. I test played it, and there's a skip in Shambhala. So,
man, of all songs.
Yeah, of all songs, I can't. It's not a repeater, so it's not that bad, but I can't in good conscience put it out. I could put it in the dollar bin and just say there's a skip on it, but I don't have a copy of it, so I thought I'll just keep this, and I'll try to work the skip out. It may just be a piece of gunk stuck in there that we can VPI out or something like that. But I'll work on that. Happy to have that in because it's still a fun one.
When I joined Columbia Record Club, my 13 albums, that was one of them.
That was one.
And I played that so much. I really, really like that. That and I bought Three Dog Night's greatest hits.
And I don't know what it is about the song Shambhala, but we talked guilty pleasures last week, and that to me it fits right in with that. I can't really explain it. It's a song that makes you feel good.
It does. It has that, it's pop sensibilities, and they're kind of like power pop almost, with just the vocals and the background vocals. It just sounds great.
Secondly, I had an upgrade come in. A very generous soul dropped off a box of records to trade. This comes from the Steve Carlson collection. I've had a copy of Bebop Deluxe, their live album. Live in the Air Age, but this one was a little bit different, a little bit better than the copy I had, so I kind of switched those out, Steve. I hope that's okay. But this one, because it has the white vinyl on there for the 12-inch side of it, and I'm still figuring out Bebop Deluxe. I like the group. There's a Record Store Day release coming up from them that I'm going to try to see if we have enough for me to get one of, but I'm really kind of getting into these guys lately, so I'm happy to, I guess I still have it in my collection. I'm happy to upgrade this into the collection, as you'll get your full trade value though. So you'll be okay. Sorry.
No worries.
And then finally, late in the week on Thursday night, actually, a friend of mine from Bay City, Michigan, Matt DeHouse, stopped in. He's a musician. I've known him for a few years. In fact, in a previous incarnation of one of the YouTube shows that I used to do, we did a longer form show called The Record Show. He allowed me to use one of his songs as the closing theme to that. But he has a new album out, and it's called Soup, or S-O, the asterisk, and then P. So SOP if you're looking at it, but it's technically Soup. Or if you really want to get technical, I got corrected on this yesterday. It's Soup Without You.
Soup without you. Soup without you.
But it's an album. But Matt is an interesting performer. He's got a very baritone voice, and you could almost compare him to Johnny Cash in a way.
Okay.
So, in fact, I was playing this when somebody stopped in the store and said, "Is that, why is Johnny Cash singing an Atlanta Rhythm section song?" It's not. It's Matt DeHouse, and this is his brand new. This actually came out digitally last year, but he had gotten around to pressing some vinyl copies of this. We do have this in the store, but it's got some very cool stuff. It's going to be, it's indie rock first and foremost, because it's a self-produced album, but it does have a little bit of that indie rock flair. But this time around, Matt has always kind of had a folksier sound to him, with some lighter guitar. This one's actually got some funk to it, and some that indie rock mixed with funk. And I mentioned the cover on there, So Into You. It's a cover of an Atlanta Rhythm section song sung by Matt, but again, it brings back this feeling that you're listening to Johnny Cash sing this.
Yeah.
And then there's some other original stuff on here as well that really get up and rock. Some have got a good groove to them. And then he's even got a secret bonus track on here that's not listed, but it's another cover song. I'll just let those that want to seek this out. You can find Matt's stuff. I hope it's on Spotify, because we'll put that link in the playlist like we do every week for the stuff that we talk about. If it's not in Spotify, I'll put a link in the description, because I think it is on Apple Music, and he does have an active YouTube channel. So I'm curious to see what you think if I send this link to you, to see where he falls on that funky Johnny Cash scale.
I like the back where it says menu. So it's soup on the front that has menu.
It's soup on the front and the menu in the back.
Pretty good.
Let me call this up solo so we can show this off proper. There we go.
Yeah.
But Soup Without You on there as well. And I mean, they're shorter songs, and it's a short album, but it's a fun listen. And Matt's a great guy, and I wish him some great success with this. And he's one of those ones that, he makes music for the sheer enjoyment of making music.
Sure.
And it's great that he was able to put this out on vinyl, and it's going to be available throughout the mid-Michigan area. I'm sure that other stores are going to have copies of it, but we're happy to have it here at our store as well. But speaking of menus and records and stuff that you can eat, but maybe not, there was one piece of news that we wanted to get to before we kick into the subject at hand today. And this is a news article. Let me see if I can call this up correctly, from the website Design Boom. And this was sent to us by our producer, Kim, who's always on the lookout. The article is Plant-Based Vinyl Replaces PVC with Sugarcane Bioplastics to Create Compostable Records. So,
thank God.
Vegan records? I'm not sure if that's where we want to go with this. I don't know how to feel about this. I mean, it's great, because, quite frankly, vinyl records are not that biodegradable. You can't really break them down that easily. That's why so many record plants tend to want to recycle these. I think you talked a little bit about at Third Man what they do with that, as far as trying to reclaim some of the shards. And then there's other places that will actually recycle used vinyl into new vinyl, but there's always some problems with particulates and contaminants in that. If you do that could affect the playback.
True.
But this, I don't know where to think about this. They call it Evo Vinyl. It's a plant-based vinyl record, but that word bioplastic still sits in there, because you got to wonder how that's going to be as far as breaking down. So it's a plant-based vinyl record made of sugarcane bioplastic that ditches the use of the PVC, the polyvinyl chloride, a synthetic thermoplastic that contributes to damaging the environment, to devise compostable records. So they've been testing this regarding in regrinding rather. The team, according to this article at Evolution Music, finds that the waste from the pressing process can be recycled back into the production process, which they do in regular vinyl pressing. But that makes this plant-based vinyl record made of sugarcane recyclable at the end of its life. So They add that the Evo vinyl can be broken down, but this only applies to industrial composting. So you can't take your record, if you're done listening to it, you can't go bury it in your garden, basically.
Yeah.
You
Well,
cannot.
I was thinking, say you're in the morning, you're having a cup of coffee or some cereal, you need a little sugar, you just take a little shavings off of that, just kind of into that. Yum.
I didn't want to listen to the first track anyway, so we've turned this into a 10-inch.
Yes, it's like it is so dang tasty. God bless sugar cane. I hope they do one in ketchup.
Oh,
That would be
no,
awesome.
it's not quite. You can put it on your burgers then.
Yeah.
But here's the big question: the sound quality with anti-static
Yeah.
properties as well. They're
Mhm.
going to test this in the decaying stages, but this gives me concern. They're confident that if treated well, that this is every reason to expect that it will last like PVC vinyl and and possibly slightly longer in sound quality because the apparent anti-static properties. They say, I love the fact that they bolded that, they say, in terms of music quality. Evo vinyl is believed to retain the quality of the songs being played. So this is obviously still in the testing phase. And I don't know, because the whole idea behind the PVC and the vinyl itself is the fact that we have records now that are 60, 70, 80. I've got one in the older shellac side, different than PVC, I realize,
Yeah.
but 100 years old. It's not unheard of to have records in that 70 to 80 year range that still are playable.
And if you're digging in the landfill, suddenly you find one, this, I can still play this. It's going to be
Well,
okay.
you have gotten some Zamrock that's been through the
Yes,
grinder,
I
been through
have.
the pasture, and it's still somewhat
Yeah.
playable.
Now, why does this keep sound? It keeps sounding like you're saying evil vinyl.
Evil vinyl.
It's Evo.
It's not Black Sabbath. It's Evo. How's that?
First, it's evil vinyl, folks. Be careful when you're spinning this. Do not spin it backwards,
There we go.
please.
Little decay. So we'll watch that. I mean, obviously that is in the testing phase still.
Yeah.
So they're going to keep, I don't know. I'm all for doing something that's going to be, I think, a little more environmentally friendly than vinyl is, because I can't stand it when people bring in junk vinyl. And here to the store, one of the things I really, really try to avoid is saying, I'm going to bag this up and send it off to the garbage to go to the landfill. We try to find as many uses for it as possible, but there's only so many bowls or other art projects that you can make with this before you have to say this one's just a goner.
And with Evo vinyl, if you don't want it, you can put it on a stick and lick it.
No, we would probably not advise.
You never know. They're testing it, still in the test phase. It could be good.
One thing that will never decay, though, is my love of the band Rush, Steve. How is that for a transition?
Ooh, very well.
So,
Done.
Onward now to the subject at hand, and I think we'd like to approach this a little bit differently. We're going to, again, title the episode Rush for Beginners.
Okay.
This is going to be one of those things, I think, that it's tremendously subjective. If I were to start saying, I think that you should start listening to Rush with this album. You've got a band that was active as a single unit for over 40 years. Now, we'll talk about the first album and how that comes into play differently. But with that, you've got a band that started in the late 60s, but then came to prominence in the early 70s, and then continued all the way into the early 2000s, into the mid 2000s. And with that, you're going to have some natural evolution in the sound of a band.
Yeah.
We've talked about this before with regards to like the Rolling Stones or any of the other bands that have had that type of longevity.
Mm-hmm.
But Rush, I think, is I don't want to say they're completely different. There are a few other bands that have maintained that type of integrity, but they have never really sold out to, we think you should sound like this.
Sure.
And because of that, there's plenty of documentaries where they talk about this, that they were not really beholden to anyone as they released their albums. But because of that, your sensibilities change. And I think we've talked about this before too, where what I liked when I was in high school is not necessarily what I liked when I got to college. Then that genre of music shifted after college and kids. And now as I'm older, that's shifting and expanding. Okay. If you'd have told 20-year-old me, 59-year-old Jim's going to be listening to bluegrass, you'd have laughed and pointed and probably pushed him down a stair. But things change and attitudes towards music change. And I think that was kind of evocative of what Rush was going through their entire time. So rather than me say, and I want to stress to everybody listening, I do not consider myself an absolute expert on the band Rush. I'm a fan, but I know some people that are just, they're up to their eyeballs in fandom and knowledge. Our friend Joe Pesh, for example, is an absolute Absolutely. I think he corrects people that post on behalf of the band and know the actual release date was this. And he's a fountain of knowledge. I like to consider myself fairly well versed in it, but I'm always learning, and there's a lot of ways to go in this. And one of the things that I have yet to learn is what I can by reading Geddy Lee's new book,
Yeah.
Hit My F in Life. I've had a lot of folks they're recommending that to me that have gotten into it. It's on my list. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be getting that as a Father's Day present or a birthday present this year. And that is going to be on my list to read. But a friend of ours said, and they even recommended to you that you read this because that would be a pathway into the listening of their music is by understanding, where Geddy Lee comes from. And I know that he's been the sticking point with you.
A little
Rush,
bit,
just
yeah,
the voice.
yeah.
I understand.
Yep.
And I get that. So with the preface that I still say, I think I've got a lot to learn, and I'm open to learning more about the band as I go through. I think I'm fairly good, but I cannot in good conscience say, if you've never listened to Rush, and Steve, you're kind of getting into it, I think you should start here. I think you should start here because of the variance that they've had. We talked about the growth individually. They did that too. They started off with some hard rock roots, then they went to that prog rock. But as the 80s came along, what happened to a lot of people in the 80s?
All went synth, baby.
It all went synth. They did too. I mean, I had one of those little tails on the back of my head, a little rat tail, and some skinny ties. So I liken their music in the mid to late 80s as that phase that a lot of us went through, where you wore skinny ties and tight jeans.
As I was cleaning out my closet, you'd be surprised how many skinny ties I had. To go, damn, those still look cool.
They do, but would you wear them is the thing.
Well, I saved a couple of them because I'm hoping they come back.
Is there such a thing as a guilty pleasure tie?
Yes, I think so.
So I think when it comes to stepping into listening to Rush, I mean, granted, I think everybody, especially this day and age, because it's so easy to have access to the wide variety of stuff. You didn't have to borrow an album or, hey, Steve, why don't you take Hemispheres? Let me know what you think. You can just click on your phone or click on your iPad, listen on YouTube, whatever the case be, and call that up almost immediately. So it's a little easier to dig into it. So I think a lot of people may have been listening to bits and pieces of Rush, and especially on rock radio, because there's a few songs that did become rock radio friendly, but I think the bulk of their content, the bulk of their creativeness never really made it to rock radio, even deep cut radio or the satellite stuff, maybe once in a while. But to get really into this, you've got to dive into the albums proper.
Sure. And again, that's where you need to be that fan that you really want to look at that. In college, Tom Sawyer came out, the album with Moving Pictures. Moving Pictures. My little brother bought that, and he put it on, and I like Tom Sawyer, but overall I go, yeah, that kind of sucks. What's wrong with you, son? I mean, bro. But his taste, he was buying Gary Newman. I'm looking, see, I was buying Talking Heads. He bought Tom Petty. Well, I'm buying some B-52s. And so it was, but we did merge our tastes. And I found a lot of the stuff that he bought now I really like because we were playing it. Again, we had one stereo, so we were listening to each other's records because we were roommates for 2 years. So we shared our music. So I did know Moving Pictures. He really liked that album a lot.
And I think through many conversations that you and I have had, your big sticking point has been the vocals.
Oh yeah. Yep. I mean, drumming. Wow, great drumming. It's almost a little, how many drums does a person need to have? We got 100 here, and I'm hitting all damn 100 of them. And the guitar playing, is pretty good, and the bass playing is good. But yes, that false, is it a falsetto or is that really just his natural voice? Is it?
There's a song by the group Pavement. I don't remember the name of the song, but right in the middle of it, they break into this little thing. I know Geddy Lee, and is his voice really sound like that? And it says, yeah, he is, man. But no, I get what you're coming from on that. It can be tough, especially in the earlier years. Now, Geddy Lee is older now. He's approaching 70, if not in his 70s. And that voice, the performance side of that, and I'd noticed that the last few times I'd seen them, and I think I've got probably about 12 Rush shows under my belt, which again is a novice compared to some folks.
Sure.
But the latter part of their career, that voice, for obvious reasons, you age, mine's crackly now too. you just can't get to where you were, especially if you built your entire career, way the heck up here with the vocal range, as he did with so many of the earlier songs. And I think on their last album, even, Clockwork Angels, it was written and Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson do the music together while Neil Peart had created the lyrics. They kind of crafted the music to the changes in Geddy's voice to be a little bit lower.
Yeah, you need to do that. You need to write to where it's going. I mean, I even know if when I'm driving in the car, I can't hit the high notes in some of those songs anymore. It's the people around me, they're looking and go, God, he really can't hit those notes, can he? Wow.
So I get where you're coming from, because sometimes that the vocals can be really, really Is piercing a good word for that, I would think. But in context of the song itself, the writing and the musicianship that goes along with it, for me, that's always worked.
Yeah.
And, I could put aside the fact that, man, that note is way up here, and, you step it up just 1 or 2, 3 more steps and you're breaking glass at that point, or calling cats, whatever the case may be. I could excuse that, because I think that there was so much other stuff that I loved about the way that they did things that made that matter to me.
Well, and I get that. Somebody sent me some Iron Maiden albums, because I never listened to Iron Maiden. I didn't much care for the voice or whatever, but it was the substance that was in there. And that seems similar to what Rush would be. There's this substance that you need to, if you don't like the voice, get past it to really look at it lyrically, what's being said and how's it being done.
And again, to me, that's the strength of this, the core of this. I would recommend that anybody that is thinking about, maybe I want to dive into Rush a little bit more, obviously read Geddy's book to let you in. Neil Peart's got several books out that he had written before he passed away as well. I'll talk about one of them more in depth. It's Ghostwriter. It's a tough read, but man, is it a good book. But you can kind of see how his writing style evolved over the years, and where it went to telling these types of very deep, and, well, Rush has always been kind of referred to as the band for nerds. And maybe that is one of the other reasons that I was into them, is because I kind of felt that. I played in high school band. I was a percussionist way back when. I broke my finger and went into radio. That's the long story short there.
It ruined my career.
Yeah, I was never really a good drummer anyway, so it didn't hurt. I think I was better at radio. But I could really respect the playing, as you mentioned, and just the overall musicianship. But the writing of the songs itself was also something that really kind of connected with me, as it did throngs and throngs of other fans. So when I mentioned looking for some of these books, there are a couple of different Rush documentaries out there as well that dive well into the history of the band, that really explain how they got to where they were and how they were able to say no to the corporate side of it and do what they wanted to do, almost at the cost of their success.
Sure.
So, but as we dive further into this, Steve, now I'm going to go chronologically. And I think I mentioned too that it's tough for me to say, as a Rush fan, I think you should start with this, because I have some of my favorite albums. I have some that I don't like as much. There's some that I'll listen to once in a great while, but they're just not go-tos for me at all. When it comes down to deciding where to start to get into Rush, you almost, I think, have to ask yourself, what type of music do you like? And this gets back to my notion that because of their 4-decade run, they've got different musical stylings to start you with, rather, and then you could work your way slowly into the other ones if you need to. Sure. But there's something really for everybody in that. When I start chronologically, we're going to start then with Rush, their first self-titled, and I'll call this one up here. Now, I do have visual aids. Go figure, I'll have every one of these. One of the other things I wanted to touch on here too, Steve, is the fact that as we go through this, I'm going to touch musically on this, but because this is the vinyl community, I also want to talk about collectability, because I think for some people, that's another big aspect of this too, is like, this is cool and I enjoy the music, but some of these have become tremendously collectible. Now, Rush's self-titled, this is going to be the rough one for a lot of fans, true fans, to get into, because this album does not feature Neil Peart. This was before he joined the band. The name of the drummer in this case was John Rutsey, and he had been with Geddy and Alex from their earlier origins. I think there was a couple of other bands in there, but when they started this and recorded this album, John Rutsey was the drummer, and all three of them worked as lyricists for this in some way, in shape, or form. So this album comes through really as that early 70s garage rock. And because they're from Toronto, not too far off from Michigan, I can really feel it's got that Midwest flavor of like an MC5, but not quite there. It's got its own distinct sound. So you're going to find some real hard rocking blues rock on this almost. I don't want to say blues straight up but this is nowhere near where they turned once Neil joined the band after this album. So you're going to get, obviously, Working Man is the biggest one. This is the one that broke through.
Song.
You know that song.
Yeah.
This is the one that broke through thanks to a radio station in Cleveland. And as they were getting ready for the tour in late 1974 on this, that's when the band, again, this is covered in the documentaries, when the band had said, John Rutsey has got some health issues. We don't think that he can do this. He doesn't think he can do this. And they essentially said, we need to find a new drummer, because the band just exploded thanks to some radio stations in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. They've got a big tour coming up, and they gave, you got a month and a half to find a new drummer. Right. And that's where they came up with Neil Peart. Again, I don't want to get too deep into the story because that's covered ad nauseum in a lot of these documentaries.
Was Lee's voice still, was it the same voice on there?
It was even higher.
It was even higher.
It was even higher because you're talking a young 20-year-old in this case, 21-year-old.
And spandex was popular.
Yep. Now, collectible wise, this was initially released in this one's 50 years old this year, by the way. Holy cow. And I'm expecting
a box set. Yes, with 10 more albums.
Yeah. I don't know for certain, but I would guess that there would be a box
start saving your money.
So this one, collectible wise, they first pressed on Moon Records in Canada. And if you can find one of these, I probably should have called that up on here, but in Canada, the Moon one is going to be out of this world. Let me see. So a 1974 Canadian Moon label, Mercury. No, that's the reissue Sky label. Hold on here, folks. This is the type of thing we probably should have prepared ahead of time, but we do what we do here.
That's the problem. It's the fault of our writers, quite honestly. They should have had that for us.
No, that's the first Canadian Mercury pressing. Even that one is in the $300 to $800 range. But yeah, some of these, let's see, 75, 74 Moon, they can be way the heck up there. Moon Records Canada 74. There we go. That one pressing in the $1,300 range. So then as they got bigger, this began Mercury. They signed on with Mercury, and even the early Mercury pressings in the US are somewhat valuable. This one I got in one of their previous box sets. I do have personally, I've got an early Mercury pressing from the US, so I don't have that high-end Moon one. That's that's way up there.
I had the CD.
Yes.
$5.
So start with that one if you're just really into raw, straight up rock and roll. And Working Man is the sound of that album. There is a couple of slower ones on there as well, but it's all that same flavor of rock.
Yeah.
Neil Peart comes on board, and he writes Fly By Night, and I could probably move some of these out. This one had a good radio-friendly hit on there with the title track, Fly By Night.
Yep.
But then it starts getting into some of these more, I can't call it prog rock yet. It's still kind of that nerdy rock where he actually writes a song based on some Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, a song about Rivendell.
It's the 70s, everyone had to take that.
And then they begin kind of getting into their high-end conceptual stuff with Bytor and the Snow Dog.
Yeah.
Which is it's a phenomenal song, but if you're not really reading along with the lyrics, you're like, what the heck is going on? This evil entity is battling a dog in a snowy landscape somewhere.
Okay, you're not. That's not selling me, Jim, whatsoever. No, I'm sorry,
but it still maintains that early hard rock feel on this one. It's still that trio coming in.
Well, it's like that. Like you said, Fly By Night was like a radio type thing.
Yes,
that's what appealed to me, and I like that. I remember listening to the rest of the CD and go, "Well, what happened? What happened? Where'd this stuff go?" Because I really enjoyed that.
Yep. Well, you start getting into Neil Peart as a writer was being influenced by Ayn Rand, and so there actually is a song called Anthem on here, which, by the way, side note, personal thing here. This is what Rolling Stone, I think, why Rolling Stone had such a big problem with the band is because they were kind of anti that, and Neil was tremendously influenced by the writings of Ayn Rand. But yeah, this one, I think, as far as the voice goes, you probably would not want to step further past Fly By Night into this. But if you can, in the end is a great, just mellow song, a way to end it. But Bytor and the Snow Dog is an intricate, just trip through this weird storyline of a battle between good and evil.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Now, Steve, this one here, Caressive Steel, their third album.
Some people swear by that one.
They do. And I'm going to say, I probably would not recommend that you hit up on this one. This one came out in 1975, their third album.
Did it have a radio hit?
It did, kind of. Bastille Day, which was a song about the French Revolution. I
Didn't
wouldn't
make it in Nebraska.
I wouldn't call that Lakeside Park, written about a place that I actually traveled to Lakeside Park last summer. I saw a Rush tribute band, Moving Pictures, representing today. They played at Lakeside Park outside of Niagara, way south of Toronto. This one really kind of begins their trip into the longer form conceptual songs. And this, I think, for you especially, would be a really tough go because there is no solid radio hit on there.
Yeah.
And it really begins to get very strange with their instrumentation. I like it at times because it does get a little heady and very, very technical with the instrumentation, but it's probably not a good one to start with. It's still that early heavy guitar Rush, but it's a little more on that the less edgy side.
Can you snap your fingers to it and whistle to it?
No.
All right, there we have it.
Now, before we get to the biggie that really launched them into the stratosphere, I need, on the collectible side, I need to mention one thing. In the interim there, they released a compilation called Archives. And this is actually pretty cool. It's a triple LP set. This is a gatefold version of Archives, and it is the first 3 albums.
Oh,
so if you're looking at the time, I think I bought this before I bought any of the first 3 individual. I had this simply because I came across, hey, it's the whole first 3 Rush albums, and it's the cost of one.
Yeah, exactly.
Back in the early 80s, it was good to get. So there's nothing special about it other than it is just those first 3 albums compiled together in one release. Truthfully speaking, now in 7 years running the record store, I think I've only ever seen this come through the store once.
Okay.
Now this is the one I've had since probably 82, 83. So.
Is it fairly, did you say goes for a decent amount or not really?
I don't recall offhand.
That's fine. I just want to make you work.
Nowadays, any early Rush nowadays is going to be, I think, a little, I'm going to have to call Archives up in there. I think judging from what I remember, it's probably going to be in the $20 to $30 range.
Okay.
Now, if you look at 10, depending upon condition,
it's
not too bad, but that's kind of a cool way to go if you're a collector looking to be a completist.
Exactly.
Now, 2112 is, I think, a good start point for those that want to start listening to Rush from that early heavy rock sound. This one, I cannot call it a concept album, and I want to do an episode on concept albums, by the way, down the line, because this is not a concept album, even though all of side 1 is one story. Yeah. It is that story of the guy living in a dystopian future where it's controlled by the priests. Stop me if I'm getting a little too
I'm just having a problem with what's been past the outfits, but that's okay.
Yeah, well, come on.
Come over to my house.
Early 70s as well. But
yes, it is.
Now, to make it a concept album, you'd have to have both sides telling one story. But this is all one side. We'll count it. But 2112 really launched them into the stratosphere. This has got early synthesizers, and I want to stress that they are not in any way sense overpowering. They're just kind of there as a sound effect in the background. But from a story perspective, this is cool. The guy's living in a dystopian future, which is controlled by a political entity that does not allow freedom of expression. Okay. And stop me if I'm getting too uncomfortable with current events and topics here. But the guy wanders outside of the controlled city and finds a guitar in a cave, and he doesn't know what it is. And then he realizing it makes music. He takes it back to the priests that control everything and said, hey, I found this. This is going to make our society better. Listen to what I can do. Listen to this music I can make. And the priests wanted nothing to do with it, and they smashed it, and he becomes despondent. Read into the story that he may or may not have committed suicide at the end before the previous inhabitants of the planet come back and destroy the priests. It's convoluted, but you have to get into the story.
Yeah. So this did not have a radio hit, I take it.
No, it did.
It did?
Well, yes and no. 2112, the overture, and the priests is one of the more commonly heard ones that you would sometimes hear on radio, but not really. Okay. And then side 2 is just some other, they got a tribute to the Twilight Zone, a song called Twilight Zone, referring to the television show in there as well. But collectible wise, this one's a good one. There are many different versions and many different reissues of that out there. Personally, I think I've got an early Canadian press and I've got a good early US press. And but this is probably one of their most iconic and most recognizable early albums. It's a good starting point for those that want to experience more of that longer form stuff that Rush does. Okay. Then we get into I should mention too, we're not going to cover live albums. They used to do 4 studio, 1 live, 4 studio, 1 live. That's a whole nother story because it's still reflective of that time period.
These are consistent.
So then we get into Farewell to Kings and just some very great conceptual art. You're going to get Closer to the Heart as the radio hit off of this one.
Yeah, I know
more
that
recognizable one. This, I think, is a great album. It becomes a tremendously technical thrill ride, I guess. Cygnus X1 is a 10.5-minute song that has the makings of a concept album, but it's just one long song that talks about a guy getting swallowed up by a black hole in a spaceship. Okay. Again, you see where I'm going with this kind of writing. I'm looking at our time. I think I'm talking too much, Steve. But Farewell to Kings is on here. It's a great album, but we're starting to get into more lighter sounds in this, some more keyboard on this, but very, very minimal entries into that.
At least I knew one of the songs.
Followed up by Hemispheres. This, I think, is a great album. This is a go-to for me as well. No big hits on this radio-wise that I think you would recognize, but this could also be a little tough on the vocals because there's some strains. Now, little known fact, the first song on side 1 is Cygnus X1 Book 2. This is going to get confusing, which is the continuation of the last song on side 2, which was Cygnus X1 Book 1. So they did a concept album spanning across 2 records.
Wow.
Last song on side 2, first song on side 1. And that was rectified and made into a single release a few years ago on Record Store Day.
Oh, Lord. Okay.
Where they released Cygnus X1 Book 1 and the opposite side was Book 2.
Very
so
nice.
Tied those 2 records together. Very kind of cool.
Well done.
So now we get to, if you've watched our podcast or listened to our podcast, you know where I'm going with this next one. Stepping into this with the radio-friendly hits of Free Will and Spirit of Radio. This is the one that you just listened to. You mentioned in your recent ads.
Yep.
What do you think?
The first 2 songs I really, really like. The rest, the other songs, I don't have problems with them. Thing is, I haven't sat to really, all right, let's look at the lyrics, because, you know, from what you're explaining on these other albums, I mean, they really go way out there. And, you know, and again, I'm just going to go back to Iron Maiden. If you don't if you don't read the lyrics, you don't know what the heck's going on. And you got to read the lyrics.
I will say that that's going to be a must for this. Once you get past those 2 radio hits, and Spirit of Radio, I've talked about before, is a song that really helped inspire me to get into radio. I mean, read the lyrics on that. You'll kind of understand where I'm going with on that. Jacob's Ladder is the 3rd song on side 1. It's a song about a thunderstorm. It's very a simplistic way of saying it, but until you can actually sit with the lyrics, and that's one of those songs I recommend you listen to on a set of headphones as well. You feel the building, you see the storm on the horizon, you feel the build, you feel the violence and the thunder, and then you feel it pass by and the shining light comes through and you've got a brand new start. I don't mean to get too philosophical on that, but essentially that's what that is. And we listened to this once when the kids were younger driving north. We drove through a thunderstorm on I-75 as the song was playing, and both of my kids, younger now, they were younger then, they were like, oh, wow. But then you get into something like Natural Science, which is the last song on side 2. Which is just a tremendously philosophical song about our place in the universe.
Okay.
So if you have a little frame of reference, I think that's a neat way to look at it, but it almost, again, necessitates you sitting down, concentrating, and maybe checking the lyrics out as you go through to get it. And I think that is a sticking point for a lot of folks with Rush, is you don't want to take the time to sit and absorb.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I can throw on a Sex Pistol album, you know, 2 minutes each song, you know, but you just go, yeah, and then you're done. You know what? Hey, there wasn't any real concept going on there, but
maybe that's why they call us geeks.
Yes.
Okay, collectible wise, early Canadian pressings of this, and I did find one of these before. On the cover, you see a newspaper there, and on the newspaper is that famous headline that says Dewey defeats Truman. They got kind of a little shaking finger saying that's the property of the paper. You can't use that for copyright purposes. So the subsequent Mercury US releases left that space blank. So that the Dewey defeats Truman is just gone from there.
Yeah.
This one that I just showed is the reissue from a couple of years ago when they get into the 180s. They put that back on there, having worked out whatever they did. But so if you're looking for early presses of this and you see that Dewey defeats Truman on the paper as a headline, you've got an early Canadian press.
Okay.
No US press has had that. It's worth maybe about $50. I got one in Canada last year, paid around that.
Yeah.
So something to look for. Now we get to moving pictures.
Yeah.
I should mention also too that the songs that I mentioned on Permanent Waves really begin to use a little bit more of a lean on synthesizers.
Sure. Yeah.
That is more fully embraced in Permanent Waves, even or in Moving Pictures, even though this features one of their most commercially successful songs in Tom Sawyer and another in Limelight.
Yeah. Yep.
This one, did you find this one fairly accessible?
Yes, that one was
Side one.
I knew. Yes, side one, great. And side two was a little, again, I didn't sit and pull out the lyrics to kind of, figure out, well, what are they talking about?
It's, again, I'll lean right back to that. You get a song like The Camera Eye, which is about living in big cities like New York and London. And it's kind of just a thank you to those big cities for all that they offer. You get a song like Witch Hunt, which is about censorship and differing ideas and persecution. And it's, again, heavy stuff, but you really kind of have to be into it. It's not something you're going to tap your feet to.
Yeah, well, I think sometimes, it goes to, we all listen differently. For instance, my listening, I hear the drums, I hear the guitars. That's a big part. A vocal, I don't really hear what they're saying because I massacre everything. That vocal is a instrument.
Yep.
And it's adding in the melody, but generally I don't have a clue what's really happening there. I just, I like this.
This one is not one that I would have recommended you start with. I would have probably said, knowing you, I would have said start with Permanent Waves, but you got a hold of a copy of this and immediately said side one is great. Side two, I don't quite get it.
Yep.
This one, I probably would say if you like Tom Sawyer, you're probably not going to like the rest of the album.
Okay.
How's that say?
Yeah. I think, well, and Limelight.
And Limelight.
Yeah.
Limelight is a fantastic song. And it's,
is.
again, written from Neil's perspective about really not wanting to be in that, but wanting to create.
Okay.
And meet people. Again, the documentary shed a lot more light onto that.
Sure.
And his thing. And this has YYZ, a tremendously intricate instrumental song that is just, it's a phenomenal ride if you're into instrumentals. And then YYZ, by the way, is the and you should know this, it's the 3-letter code for the Toronto airport.
Oh, yeah. That's okay.
Mr. Travel Guy, though,
True.
right?
Haven't landed in Toronto yet, though. Okay.
And that's just their homage to coming home to Toronto. They would always be greeted with that YYZ on touring. Now we're getting into the heavy synth years. I'm going to kind of double down on these and say Signals is next up in 1982, followed by Grace Under Pressure in 84. These really begin to feel that 80s synthesizer stuff. Now there's hits on here. You get things like Subdivisions, which was a tremendously important song for the group, connecting with that suburban youth in the 80s who felt disassociated and picked upon and just not part of anything bigger than themselves. And this album, I think more than anything, is what led people to become true diehard Rush fans because of the connect they made with teenagers in that era. And again, in 1982, I was in high school, and that what was connecting with me, but still not my favorite album because of the heavy synths. Grace Under Pressure, still a good one. I don't think there's any really big radio hits on this. After Image is a song about losing someone in a car crash, which foretold something, and it's not a pleasant one. How's that and that? But these, I guess, start with these if you're more into that 80s synth sound and really get into it. That continues with the next 2 or 3 coming in. You get Power Windows and Hold Your Fire. These are good. No big hits on them. Same thing. You get a song, Manhattan Project, about, those of you who watched Oppenheimer, it's a song about the development of the atomic bomb. Again, not your typical Kiss love gun type of stuff. Here, they're writing about some heady subjects, which is going to turn a lot of people off on this. Hold Your Fire, again, I saw this tour as well. It's good. There's a tremendously depressing song called Time Stands Still on this, which is about getting older and watching your family grow up and grow old, but it's a very touching one. But again, very synth oriented.
Sure. Yep.
All right, let's move on to some rock. Presto is one of the forgotten ones. There's some good stuff on here, but nothing that really stands out for me. This is a good album, but not one of my go-tos.
Nice Rabbits, though.
It is. It's a cool one. It's coming up in this time of year in spring. Then you get
Easter.
Yes. Then you get Roll the Bones. Now this one is an interesting one because it features a foray in the song, in the title track, with a rap in the middle of it, but it's not really a rap. It's more of just a quick, just a quick trip into the rap. And this is them experimenting. There's still some keyboard centric stuff on here, but this is the beginnings of them returning to that guitar rock sound.
Yeah.
The trio try. So Roll the Bones, the big one on here as well. Dreamline, they was always kind of a good one being played as well, but still, I wouldn't recommend starting with these. You're going to probably want to start at either of the ends of their career.
Yeah. Which one of them played the synths? Or did they bring
Geddy
in a
Lee did.
different?
He
Geddy
would.
Lee did. Okay.
He would. Having seen them live, it's tremendous. They would always write things to say, let's make sure that we don't do something that the three of us cannot play live.
Yeah.
So to see Geddy Lee singing, playing bass, and playing keyboards with the synthesizers with his feet was incredible at the same time.
I was just going to say, I was just going to make what? He was using his feet? And he was.
He was using his feet. And then there would be times where the bass would be kind of secondary and he would play the keyboards straight up just with his hands. But then there's other times he's playing bass and keyboards and doing it's amazing to see.
He wasn't doing Rachmaninoff with his feet, though. Okay.
All right. Wow. We're kind of moving too quickly in through this, but we get back into the heavier rock sounds with Counterparts. And this has got a song called Animate on here, which was a staple of their live stuff. This is a 3-sided with an etching version of this because this came out in the CD era. We're getting into some, by the way, that are tremendously collectible. These because they weren't initially pressed on vinyl.
Yep.
And then when they did, they were just kind of really, really taken up. Guitar and synth throughout this, but it's got more of a 90s rock feel as you get into this. This was 93. So, and then we get into Test for Echo, which again is a good one. I enjoy it. This one was from 96, but not high up on there for me. Driven is a great song. I saw that performed live. I think they would perform some of their more memorable ones that they loved as well. But you're getting into much more heavy guitar rock sound with this, with the keyboard taking a backseat to this. Now, this is where Rush takes a break, and it's a tremendously heartbreaking break. Mm-hmm. Neil Peart lost right after the tour of this, he lost his daughter in a car accident in Canada. And then less than a year later, his wife died of cancer.
Oh, wow.
So at that point, Neil Peart says, I'm done. Rush is over. Consider me retired.
Sure.
And if you look for the book Ghost Rider by Neil Peart, it's a book that he wrote following his period of healing. When he said he was done with the band after that, he hopped on his motorcycle. After everything settled down, he hopped on when his wife died, hopped on his motorcycle, drove from Ontario all the way across Canada, through Alaska, all the way up to the Arctic Sea at the tip of Alaska, and then back down through California into Mexico and all the way down through Central America, and then back again on a solo motorcycle ride. And his book, Ghost Rider, chronicles that and his trail of healing coming back from the death of his wife and the deaths of his wife and his daughter. Tremendously moving, sad, but also tremendously inspiring. And when he finished with that, he slowly came back to the band and said, I think I'm ready to do this again.
Sure.
And that resulted in Vapor Trails coming up in, I have to look at this because this one we'll talk collectability why. 2002 is when we get into Vapor Trails. Very heavy guitar, and Neil Peart's writing takes a little bit of a turn to the more, it's hard to say, more philosophical after some of those other ones.
Yeah, no kidding.
But in a way it did. Now, collectible wise, if you ever find this one is the name of this album technically is Vapor Trails Remixed. The original Vapor Trails, the band was very, very unhappy with the mix that they got on the vinyl.
Okay. And
so they pulled it, remixed it, and released an entirely new album. Vapor Trails proper is the only Rush album I don't own. And it's in the several $100 range, and I'm not willing to go quite there yet. So you get this one, but there's some great stuff on here. One Little Victory kicks it off, and I think that summarizes Neil Peart's feelings coming off of everything. Okay, and then oddly, we get into a cover album in between these last two. This is called Feedback, where the band decided to pay tribute to the music that inspired them from the late 60s and early 70s. So you've got covers on here of Summertime Blues, Heart Full of Soul from the Yardbirds, Buffalo Springfields for What It's Worth, The Seeker from The Who, Mr. Soul, Shapes of Things, Another Yardbird, and The Crossroads on here. Now, if you're not too happy with Geddy's vocals, you may not think that these are very good, but some of them I think are just great versions. Mr. Soul in particular, he kind of tones it down. So that's a cool one to get a hold of. And then we're kind of coming down the home stretch here, Steve, looking at our time, with an album called Snakes and Arrows. This one was from, and I saw this tour twice. Once when it started in 2007, and then in 2008, I saw the tail end of it as well. This is an album that personally I had a lot of trouble getting into at first. Now it's one of my favorite Rush albums.
I remember you looking for that.
Yeah, we are tremendously guitar heavy, rock oriented. We're back to the roots in this case, but not quite to the acid roots of that first Rush album. But they've kind of come full circle with this. A song called Far Cry and Working Them Angels are some of the, they're great songs on here. Very, again, heady and lyrically important songs. But once I sat down and really began to absorb this, it became one of my favorites. So, and it's also tremendously valuable if you find the original 180 gram, which I finally did. That's one of those ones that it was a tough one to get, and I've got the reissue copy.
You were quite excited about it.
I was. And then they wrap up their studio career with Clockwork Angels, and oddly enough, this is the band's only full concept album.
Okay.
It tells a full story of a watchmaker. It's another sci-fi epic, as Neil wrapped up his writing career with this. I am currently where I was at the beginning of with Snakes and Arrows with Clockwork Angels, meaning that this is still a tough listen for me, and I don't quite know where to go, but it's growing on me. Every time I listen to it, I pick up a little bit more. My son found me the graphic novel to this that helped kind of tell the story as well, which is cool when you're reading the liner notes. But yeah, this is another hard rocker. This may be a good one, or Snakes and Arrows, for you to start off with if you're really into that more modern rock sound.
Yeah.
It's still got Geddy's vocals, but they're tremendously loud through there. So,
do they have a greatest hits?
They do, actually. There's a few different out there. One's called Icon. It's on vinyl, and then there's a few others that have appeared on compact disc, just compilations. But the Icon one, I've always had a problem with because it's over on the shelf there. But it was thrown together, obviously, by a record executive who didn't quite get what Rush was, and the ordering and the selection of the records on that Icon record is just like, why would you put this on here? You should have put this. But again, that's the Rush fan in me speaking. I think a lot of people would say that as well. So
if this would be the radio hit fan speaking.
Yes, but no. In some cases, no. There's other ones that are just like, that come out of nowhere. That'd be like, why would you put that in there?
Okay.
So long story short, Steve, I think I've got a problem. I like Rush a lot, and I want other people to like Rush. I want you to like Rush, but I'm also very cognizant of the fact that the different tastes have people coming in differently. I guess if I had to sum it up, I think that if you're a fan of hard rock, you like that newer hard rock, start with the later stuff, Snakes and Arrows, Clockwork Angels. If you like that early acid rock sound, get the first Rush album and nothing else and stop there. If I had my druthers to say, if anybody looking at the entire catalog, I would say start with Permanent Waves, then go to 2112, and then possibly into Moving Pictures at that point. But Moving Pictures, I think, is still a tough album outside of those two hits. And I'm going to take heat for that, but that's just kind of where I think on that.
Okay.
Where would you think you would start? You started with Moving Pictures.
Hey, you know what? You gave me that one album here. So
Permanent Waves.
So obviously that's where to go. I would kind of curious on the last one, if that's a harder rock sound, just to see if it's not so synth heavy.
It is not, but there's synth there, but they've stopped relying on them as heavily as they did in the 80s.
Yeah.
So really, I think that it's as I said, it comes down to your own personal tastes. Do you like the synth? Do you like the hard rock? Do you like the progressive sounds that tell a story that you really have to concentrate on? That may not be the thing for everybody.
Yeah.
But that really would, I think, dictate on where you would start going with this.
Sure. Well, and that kind of, again, many people really like prog. Why? They like the story. They like all that lines. And, if you're a punk rocker, you don't worry about any of that kind of stuff happening.
You want a 2-minute song and not a 12-minute one that spans across two records, side two and side one.
You just want a song that makes you want to go out and break a window or something like that.
There you go. But again, for me, coming from that somewhat musical background and then into the technical side of radio and television, and the storytelling especially, I think was something that was tremendously appealing to me. I did connect with them because of that storytelling nature and the technical and just the absolute perfection that came through in the music.
Yeah.
And the way that it was written. So,
and it's great to have a group that you have that kind of passion on. I mean, it's the beauty of music. It's why we collect music. It's what excites us is we have groups that create passion.
we do.
And that's what it does.
So very curious to see what you folks think. Please comment either on the YouTube channel or on our Facebook page. You feel free to take me to task on my lack of knowledge of Rush, purporting to be a Rush fan in some cases. But is there a group that makes you feel like that you think you can step through? Or is there a specific place in the Rush discography you think that you would like to start or you did start? Let us know.
Yep.
Cool.
All right.
So where do we go from here, Steve? You're back out.
Heading Denver tonight.
Oh, man.
Yep. For come back in a couple of weeks. So we'll do this again in store.
We'll do this one more time in store, but we'll stick to it through here. Okay. Well, thanks, Steve, for taking the time to come in today. But you folks have been watching and or listening to two guys talking about records. In this case, a lot of Rush records. I apologize for monopolizing too much of that, Steve. But we will talk to you folks next week. Have a great one. Until then, I'm Jim, and I own a record store.
I'm Steve. I'm a record collector that has 2 Rush albums.
There you go.